Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
And we're here for the Big Jubbly episode.
At last, the Platinum Jubbly has come to a close.
Eventually.
After 4 very drawn-out days, which kicked off with a thunderous fly past that we could actually hear from our own flat 6 miles away from Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, this was on the Thursday, which was the first of a series of bank holidays here in the UK, so we could all make sure...
2 bank holidays.
Well, yeah, 2 bank holidays that made sure we could all pay attention to the Queen and only the Queen.
Although some of us are self-employed, so we were working on that day, or trying to work, and the noise from this thing was like nothing I had heard before.
Yeah, I really wasn't expecting for it to invade our own personal space quite as much as it did. I thought this was very much going to be a television-based weekend. But yes, trooping was, as always, a big procession. It had all the main players. We got Prince Charles, William, and they were in the main part of the procession, in the kind of military part of it. And then in the carriages that followed, you had one with Anne's husband, Tim Lawrence, along with the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. There was another carriage that had Sophie and Edward and their kids. That's James and Louise.
Louise wearing a rather tragically age-inappropriate sort of hand-me-down outfit from Sophie, with a hat that Sophie had worn to trooping years ago.
I mean, this hat looked shit on Sophie, and it looked bad on her as well. Like, it's a hat...
I feel mean for saying it, though. She's only 18, but her mum just has a
crap taste.
Really bad taste.
Like, both times this hat has been worn, it hasn't gone with the outfit. So, yeah, I guess we shouldn't have expected anything different this time. But yeah, the big deal was the final carriage.
Which had Camilla Parker Bowles, Kate Middleton, and making their trooping debut, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis.
It was so funny to see Louis, and very cute seeing Charlotte smacking down his enthusiastic waving to the carriage. So funny.
Obviously, everyone has already seen all the photos of Louis on numerous occasions over this weekend, but I think that photo on the balcony of him blocking his ears is maybe my favourite royal photo ever.
Yeah, it was really good.
It was so funny.
Very much what we were doing in our flat as well.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it was like to hear it that up close as a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Kind of horrible. But yes, very funny pictures. I want to talk about the outfits though.
Mm-hmm.
So the Queen was wearing a dove blue coat by her dresser, Angela Kelly, who we've talked about many times. This coat had a scallop-shaped pearl and diamante trim around the neckline, which made it feel a little bit jazzier than a regular coat. And she wore it with a matching hat, which had a turned-up brim, which was smart, so you could see her face.
And we'd previously seen that coat the night before in this formal portrait that was released to mark the occasion. So it's sort of rewear, something we were familiar with, and very much the official Jubbly outfit for any and all history books. I was surprised she didn't go with the Jubbly purple that we've been seeing in like all of the branding leading up to it.
Yeah, I thought there would be a brighter colour, although she did then wear a very bright green the second time that we saw her on the balcony. Kate wore a white coat dress that we had previously seen before. I think it's Alexander McQueen. She wore it to a G7 reception last summer. And I thought she had a very nice navy and white Philip Treacy hat. And as well as that, there was a pair of diamond and sapphire earrings from Princess Diana's collection, which people are very excited about, as they always are.
The kids were all in blue. Had George in the first of what is no doubt going to be a lifetime of navy suits.
Yeah, the last time we saw him at trooping, he was in one of those little Peter Pan collar blouses and shorts. So quite a graduation here.
Yeah, he's now, throughout this, been dressed as soon-to-be working royal, I think. Charlotte was in a really nice blue dress. Louis was wearing a sailor shirt. It was one that Will had worn to trooping just 37 years ago.
It's kind of mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
The best outfit for me, though, and I think for you as well, even though we barely saw it, was Meghan Markle's outfit. The first we saw of Harry and Meghan was these kind of blurry photos of them watching trooping through a window, and Meghan was wearing a navy dress, which looked to me to be the Roland Murray one that she wore the day before her wedding, with the kind of asymmetric collar and then an asymmetric hat, a white Philip Tracy hat with this oversized navy bow. Stunning.
Loved that hat.
What a great hat. I think Meghan has had a sort of hit and miss record with hats in her royal career, and this to me was by far the best one that she's worn. Yeah. Would have loved to see the full look, but totally understand why she was keeping a low profile on this occasion.
Yeah, then in the evening, there was a beacon lighting ceremony at Windsor Castle. God. So the Queen led the lighting of more than 3,000 beacons across the UK and the Commonwealth by pressing the Commonwealth Globe of Nations, which was a special button created for the Jubbly.
This whole project I thought was so strange. It was like basically a whole lot of Christmas lights.
Yeah.
I had thought there'd be, you know, fiery beacons, like Olympic style stuff.
Yeah.
But instead, so she presses this big button and then it lights up a whole load of these kind of bluey white Christmassy type lights. And then at the same time, Prince William gives the nod to light the Tree of Trees at Buckingham Palace, which is a hideous sculpture, 21 metres, consisting of 350 trees in little pots hanging from steel branches on a steel trunk.
Yeah.
Such an ugly tree. And then, yeah, all the lights are this kind of bluey, just a very ugly looking...
Cold.
It was very cold and very ugly.
Yeah, it wasn't nice. Like, because I remember seeing early like computer renders or like artist mock-ups of what the Tree of Trees was going to look like, and I'm pretty sure it was meant to be or planned to be like a wooden structure with the trees on it. And obviously, in the person's imagination, these trees looked healthy, whereas I think in reality, yeah, this like metal and dying tree extravaganza didn't really work.
And calling it the Tree of Trees as well. I guess the idea of it was then they could take those 350 trees and replant them. Yeah. So it was a more environmentally friendly idea, but it just looked like shit to me.
The royals love nothing better than planting single trees around the place and saying that's environmentalism.
Also on Thursday evening, it was announced that the Queen would not be appearing the following day at the service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral after experiencing some discomfort after trooping. I had seen some royal reporters saying that that basically means she must have been howling in pain.
Yeah. It's like for her to like, I guess, miss this event that was widely seen as the most likely one that she would attend.
Yeah, and it's the kind of religious service, so it's one acknowledging her role as head of the Church of England.
Yeah.
Also missing the service.
Yeah, Prince Andrew. I couldn't believe when we got the push that he had got COVID and that's why he wasn't going to be at any of the celebrations. It was like, wow, they're just straight up lying to us now.
It happened during the military fly past, which I thought was so smart because there was so much else going on. If they had announced this very convenient positive COVID test the day before, then there would have been all this build up and that would have become a story in itself. But as it came out, it was totally overshadowed by everything else that was going on and nobody really talked about it at all.
Yeah, no one had time to because everyone had to talk about like all the carriages and stuff. But yeah, he sat out the whole weekend, so no appearances from Andrew, which was a good decision for the royals.
It was just very convenient that he got COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah, just a real great coincidence.
The Archbishop of Canterbury also had to miss the weekend. He was due to be at the service in St. Paul's because he got COVID too, just after he gave an interview to ITV News where he said, "Now with Prince Andrew, I think we all have to step back a bit. He's seeking to make amends and I think that's a very good thing. Forgiveness really does matter. I think we have become a very, very unforgiving society." Wow.
I couldn't believe it. So he later issued a clarification saying he wasn't referring specifically to Andrew, but was making a broader point about the kind of society that he hopes the Platinum Jubilee inspires us to be.
Sure.
Whatever. But like, obviously forgiveness is a very big part of Christianity, but so is like owning up to your actions. And everything that Andrew has done over the last like 2 years has been to avoid doing that, to like avoid acknowledging that he's done anything wrong, to avoid, you know, having to take the stand and talk about his actions. Like, you don't just get forgiveness for nothing.
True. Elsewhere on Thursday evening, Prince Charles and Camilla appeared on EastEnders.
Yeah, they made a cameo at a street party hosted by Danny Dyer's character, Mick Carter. We did watch the episode, but I have to say, even though I watched EastEnders as a child, I very much felt like a tourist in Albert Square.
Me too. I mean, I'd never seen an episode before and was quite lost during this half hour.
Yeah.
So I thought it would make more sense to hand things over to our friend of the pod, Shy Charles, EastEnders correspondent, to give us a deep dive into this very special appearance.
Over to you.
Well, hello, Airheads. Wow, thanks so much for having me as your kind of one-off Albert Square correspondent. Who would have ever thought that such a thing might be needed in an episode of Airheads? But we are living in extraordinary times, and yeah, I'm very happy to be discussing EastEnders. Hopefully, I'm well placed to offer a few thoughts because I do rarely miss an episode. Although I still had to be guided to a couple of points that I hadn't noticed. Indeed, Tom and Maeve were the first ones to mention to me this whole business about the huge portrait of Princess Diana in the Vic, which I'm just going to start with because there's a few kind of points about logistics or kind of like compromises or arrangements that seem to have needed to have been made to make this episode happen. Don't know whether the removal of Princess Diana from the Queen Victoria public house set dressing was like a request of the royals or just something that someone thought would be a diplomatic thing to do. I hadn't noticed that Diana was gone until it was pointed out to me. I always notice that picture of Princess Diana because it's absolutely huge. It's about a metre square picture of Princess Diana, illustration of Princess Diana with just her head and her hair kind of glowing like a blonde halo hovering above all of the drama that takes place in this pub. And whenever I notice it, I have a little thought about Princess Diana. So the fact that I hadn't noticed it in recent episodes, I just thought maybe they hadn't used that camera angle, but I was wrong. It's been replaced with a kind of full-length photo of the Queen on Coronation Day. And actually, there's little photos of the Queen all around the place in the pub now. It's kind of surreal. And there used to be a plate, a kind of blue background plate showing Princess Diana in that kind of famous White Witch kind of Snow Queen outfit with the high pearly collar. And that was on a china plate by one of the doors to the pub. That's obviously also gone as well. So I have noticed all this now. The big Diana picture was last visible in an episode way back on May the 24th when characters called Sonia and Kath are actually sat right in front of it discussing the magnitude of the 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II. And I wonder if someone maybe saw that and thought, oh, that's a curious juxtaposition. Maybe we should rethink this for the royal visit. Then there followed a few episodes with no shots from the inside of the pub at all because the action was taking place elsewhere. And then, of course, on May the 30th, these were replaced with a big photo of the Queen. And it's still, to my disappointment, like that now because I just think a full-length photo of the Queen might look quite dramatic in real life, but like it's so much less dramatic than this huge face. And I think that was like a really nice idiosyncratic piece of set dressing that was really noticeable about the Queen Vic. And yeah, I hope it kind of comes back. Also, I mentioned to Tom and Maeve recently that there's been loads of setup about the Prince's Trust, which I don't know whether this was a stipulation from Charles's camp, that they had to talk about the Prince's Trust all the time. But there's a character called Zach, who is Sharon Rickman's half-brother, a newish character. He's supposed to be a sort of roguish heartthrob, and he has a background that was quite underprivileged in many ways. I think he grew up in foster care some of the time and stuff, and he was a beneficiary of the Prince's Trust. He's also like passionate about cooking, and I kind of feel like he might have said that that was something that he was inspired towards by the Prince's Trust. So because this is kind of mentioned a few times before the royal visit, you kind of think that Charles is going to ask some kind of insightful questions or say at least how proud he is to meet a beneficiary of his work with the Prince's Trust or whatever. But instead, when Zach says, oh, I'm a Prince's Trust graduate, Charles says, oh, you survived it, did you? And that was the extent of it. So I don't know. That's quite funny, I suppose, but it doesn't seem like very much payoff for all of the setup that went into that. There were some things that I didn't like about the episode. I kind of was taken out of the realism is the wrong word, but I was taken out of the believability of it, or taken out of the moment all the time, by wondering just how much of it was scripted or how much was improvised. I think a couple of key moments must have been scripted, because everyone kind of like was leading up to a punchline or something. But I also think that obviously if anyone is going to be able to walk around and talk to a bunch of strangers and say something that roughly makes sense, it will be the royals. I mean, not that they always make sense, but they're obviously professionals, if nothing else, at responding with something that, I don't know, 7 or 8 times out of 10 is sort of neutral and appropriate. And actually, there was also kind of like a bit of a weird rushed kind of slightly janky feel about the episode. There were like not that many camera angles, and the sound was a bit off at points, which really gave it the feel of one of those live episodes that they used to do on EastEnders at the conclusion of a massive story, which always had 1 or 2 mistakes in them. I guess just because they probably had very limited time with Charles and Camilla. The patter and the kind of conversation was pretty excruciating. There's 10 or 15 minutes of it. Charles and Camilla are on screen for a really long time, and it kind of made me curl my toes a little bit, but I couldn't decide whether I was enjoying it or not. You know, like, I guess that kind of like awkward kind of comedy, like Nighty Night or The Office or something, where people enjoy being kind of tortured by a really awkward situation. It kind of had that feel to it, and also I'm sure that actually is very true to life. You know, I think I probably would feel very awkward if I was in some kind of welcoming line and Prince Charles was plodding towards me, and I could hear him pretending to be interested in people's lives, and I could hear people pretending that they respected him and sort of chuckling together as he, you know, like, I think that's probably exactly what it actually is like. Some bits of this kind of like patter were more successful than others, and in fact I did notice when I was reviewing again a moment where Prince Charles says to a deaf character called Frankie, who's played by quite a famous deaf actor called Rose, her last name escapes me, but she is quite well known now for being amazing in Strictly, and he says to her, "Oh, you can lip read very well," which at the best of times might be, I think, not that I know loads about how deaf people feel about everything, but possibly slightly patronising thing to say to someone who's been deaf all their life. But even more so because he delivers this line before he has said anything else to her. How could he know that she was a good lip reader? Because he hadn't said anything to her, or probably had time to notice her speaking to other people. So, but then to be completely fair, he might have been given that line, kind of fed that line to say, or given some notes about the characters, and just timed it a bit wrong. Like in this kind of rushed filming kind of schedule, maybe he was supposed to have said something first, or maybe another actor was supposed to have said something to her, and then he is supposed to have noticed that she was an amazing lip reader and said this. But even so, don't know about that one. And also, I didn't like the fact that nearly all the characters seemed to know royal etiquette, which was just like, so, you know, like they should have made it a little bit rougher and a bit more rough and tumble. Like, you know, Nancy Carter saying "Your Royal Highness" to Camilla Parker Bowles. Like, she's the daughter of the pub landlord, and he is Mick Carter, played by Danny Dyer, of course. I don't think she would have like said anything rude or ruined the day, because she would have wanted this to go really well, because, you know, it was a visit that was being organised by her father and stuff. But still, she's like such an outspoken, irreverent character. Her saying "Your Royal Highness" kind of, and lots of other characters kind of acting like that, just didn't ring true to me at all. Although Stacey Slater did just sort of say she was sort of like, "Oh, hello, nice to meet you," which I thought was much better. And obviously everyone lining up in the right place and knowing exactly what to do, even though this was supposed to be like a surprise visit, and saying neat little things to introduce themselves, just didn't ring true at all either. But I suppose you just have to slightly suspend your disbelief, because it's like this kind of like extraordinarily weird moment. But it did kind of expose the falseness of the whole show in a way that irked me as someone who's sort of very much in the world of EastEnders. And also, yeah, they met loads and loads and loads of characters, but I would have liked them to have met 1 or 2 more iconic ones, like Kat Slater, who wasn't there. And not having them meet Kim Fox seemed like a real missed opportunity to me, because she's one of the most kind of wisecracking, excitable, sort of effervescent people in the show. But she was in a gay bar at the time, dressed as Shirley Bassey, so she wasn't able to come out and meet them, which was a shame. Also, the visit, they made it seem like a character called Rocky was going to arrange this visit to impress Sonia, who he originally met when he was pretending to be her father as part of a scam. But he kind of fell for her and is trying to be her friend now. And he wanted to kind of show that he can make good on a promise and organise a fantastic Jubilee celebration. And you thought that he was going to somehow intercept the royal schedule and get them to come. But then in the episode, as the episode got closer, you realise he was actually going to hire Charles and Camilla lookalikes to judge the talent show that was taking place in the gay bar to celebrate the Jubilee. So we kind of were lured into the kind of surreal and fun idea as an audience that the real Charles and Camilla were going to be on the square, and so were a Charles and Camilla lookalike. But the Charles and Camilla lookalikes get, I don't know, stuck in traffic or something, and they never show up. And there's a kind of like meant to be hilarious and not that funny moment where Rocky sees Charles and Camilla and he's kind of like, oh, about bloody time, they were supposed to be here ages ago, and he's kind of like a police person, like steps in the way to stop him from speaking to them. But what would have been actually way better is if the lookalikes did show up and then hilarity ensued, because you have lookalikes in the Albert Gay Bar and the real deal outside the Queen Victoria pub. Like, that would have been much better. So a couple of missed opportunities, but I suppose you can't have everything. Another thing I wanted to mention, which I think is possibly the biggest missed opportunity of all, is whenever someone comes into Eastenders who hasn't been in it for a while, or in Charles and Camilla's case, who have never been in it, they get out of a taxi and a shot is created that slowly rises from their shoes upwards to their face as they maybe breathe in the air and take a look at their surroundings. It's very iconic, it's very camp. If you've never watched EastEnders, but you have watched 101 Dalmatians with Glenn Close, rather like when her car pulls up outside her company's building and she steps out with her nail-like high-heeled shoes and walks up the steps. Like, that's what we're going for. And I really think, yeah, they might have tried to keep all of the filming as simple as possible, but they definitely should have had Charles's whatever weird loafery shoes that he wears and Camilla's modest heels clomp down out of the door of the royal vehicles and onto the streets of Albert Square to add build up and surprise and camp value. And I think actually that perhaps that and them not meeting Kat Slater are the chief missed moments. I did enjoy Camilla saying that she had tried rum from Trinidad to Patrick Truman and saying, oh, it's jolly good stuff. And I have heard people say that they thought it was awkward. I kind of think that, yes, it was a bit awkward because the royals do seem very strange. But I think she carried it off with some flair. There was a glimmer in her eye, maybe just because she was discussing, drink. But yeah, and she sort of said, oh yes, I will try some of it. And they were going to do a shot together. It was a shame not to see her actually try any of it because it cut away before that. But yeah, I really enjoyed Patrick trying to use his charms on her and get her to have a drink. And there was a moment that sort of was meant to be quite poignant and kind of was quite poignant when Camilla was asked by Sharon Watts, who seemed to acquire this nickname at the last minute of like the Princess of Albert Square. Very convenient. I'm not sure I've heard her being called that before. And someone said to her, wow, the princess can ask a favour from the Duchess. But she asks Camilla to take a moment to tie a ribbon to a tree in the square in the garden for a ceremony that was going to be happening at the same time anyway. And that's there to the memory of a character called Chantel, who was killed by like a horrible, horrible husband called Grey. And so Chantel, this character's mother, was there to meet Camilla, and Camilla does kind of like tie a ribbon to the tree and says, oh, it's important that we need to remember everyone who's a victim of intimate partner violence or domestic violence, I think she says. And like that was kind of quite neatly linked to real life. I think I even heard on the radio a few months ago, Camilla talking with a grandmother whose daughter had been killed by her husband and who's ended up raising her grandkids, which is exactly the situation in EastEnders with Karen as well. And yeah, that was kind of like quite sweet, because I think it was a really impactful story, and it was interesting to see that being remembered or kind of brought back up by this royal cameo moment. And overall, at the end of the episode, I did kind of feel something. I was sort of moved somehow when they all gathered together to raise a glass to the Queen. Now, was that patriotic fervour that was induced by this like slightly mad 10 minutes? I don't think so. I think it was I'm always very emotional when EastEnders use anything other than the standard theme tune. And in this one, they had a sort of version with like trumpets that rang out a brief refrain of the national anthem and then went into kind of like a classical rendition with no drums of the theme tune. And that sort of thing always somehow does get me. And I think I was also just kind of like stupefied by the unusualness of it all. But those were some thoughts anyway on the episode. And it's certainly something that I won't forget anytime soon.
Thank you so much, Guy. That was like such an incredible breakdown, and definitely not something we ever could have come up with ourselves. So we really
Yes,
appreciate
thank you
that.
so much. Now that Charles and Camilla have gotten this taste for the screen, the silver screen, there are reports in The Sun that they may even be hosting a special episode of their favourite show, Strictly Come Dancing, at Buckingham Palace, and they may even dance.
Oh my god, can't wait to see that. A lucky guy that gets to dance with Camilla.
On to Friday.
Yes, so this was the centrepiece of the Jubbly weekend, really. It was this Thanksgiving service at St Paul's, and this was where Harry and Meghan made their only public appearance of the weekend.
I thought it was remarkable that we didn't get any photos of the family together outside the cathedral. They very carefully choreographed the arrival times, the entrances, the exits, basically so that everyone was arriving in pairs or small groups. There was no one hanging around, straight in, straight out.
Yeah, I think it's probably very smart of them, because if there have been any photos of the Sussexes and the Cambridges together, like, that is all anyone would have been talking about. Like, pulling focus from the Queen and giving body language experts, another 2 years of income.
The big headline, though, from this event was whether Harry and Meghan were booed as they made their way into Cathedral.
Yeah, so there were some Sussex fans who were insistent that this footage had been dubbed with the, incredibly loud boos that Boris Johnson received when he both arrived and left the service.
I thought the BuzzFeed News reporter Ellie Hall did a good breakdown of all this, sort of investigating what happened. She looked at the videos from the official Reuters and Agence France Presse AFP feeds, as well as a couple of videos from royal watchers on the ground.
Yeah, including Elizabeth Holmes. She says that the boos at her side were due to a bus blocking people's view.
And there were also some anti-Sussex people who posted their own boos, videos of their own boos outside the cathedral. The BuzzFeed News conclusion, though, and my conclusion as well, is that there were audible cheers and boos.
Yeah, and that made total sense to me, because the kind of people who fucking turn up to these kind of monarchist events are people who love the royal family, and you cannot say that Harry and Meghan are beloved by everyone who loves the royal family, because a lot of those people are super into the aspects of British culture and tradition that are racist and exclusionary and all sorts of things. So I think it's very reasonable to assume that some of these people who turned up do not like Harry and Meghan.
Yeah, and obviously it's incredibly rude.
Yeah.
But I would say not totally surprising.
As Ellie Hall describes it in this piece, she says it's like a kind of royal Rorschach test. She says it's really hard to find the truth in a story about the royals these days, especially Harry and Meghan. And I think that's something that we've really felt over the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, as she puts it, those who love Harry and Meghan refuse to accept anything except the most positive of narratives, discarding information that doesn't fit their worldview, like the fact that there were some boos for Harry and Meghan. Those that hate them eagerly seize upon the narrative that paints them in the worst possible light, ignoring information that detracts from or contradicts their worldview, like the fact that there were many cheers for Harry and Meghan, or that Prince William was booed at the FA Cup final last month. We seem to have reached a point where nobody clicks on a story about the royal family, particularly a story about the Sussexes, with an open mind. Facts can be discarded if they don't align with your feelings.
Yeah, so well put.
It's extremely on point.
Yeah. But the other big question of that day is whether or not Harry and Meghan snubbed the reception that was held after the service.
So the rest of the royals, as well as Boris Johnson, the Home Secretary Priti Patel, and some other politicians, went on to Guildhall for a reception following the service. There were varying reports over whether Harry and Meghan were invited and didn't go, whether they weren't invited at all.
Yeah.
Hard to know the truth. I feel like the fact they didn't go does give you some indication into where things stand.
Yeah, and how involved they are prepared to be in these things as well. Mike Tyndall, who husband of Princess Anne's daughter Zara, also revealed that Harry and Meghan skipped a cousin's lunch after trooping the day before. So I think it does seem like Harry and Meghan were quite specific about the kind of events and things they wanted to go to.
or that the royal family were quite specific about the kind of events that they were welcoming Harry and Meghan at.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the outfits though, Tom?
So the big one obviously is Meghan. She wore a dove grey Dior Haute Couture trench coat and skirt with a white hat by Stephen Jones.
The trench coat, obviously a Meghan style signature, as is the neutral colour. It came off to me like a white coat dress, which I would have thought was such a hallmark of Kate's style.
Yeah, I was very surprised.
A white coat dress like Kate wore the day before at Trooping.
It did blend in very nicely with the stone columns and stuff in the cathedral.
Yeah, and she looked very elegant. Of course, it goes without saying that we both really admire her for holding her head high. I feel like that sort of walk, almost like a runway down through the cathedral, must have been extremely intimidating, really put the spotlight on them. But they, particularly Meghan, carried themselves very well, and she probably felt very confident wearing Dior Couture. I know Princess Diana also turned to European fashion houses rather than British brands after she left the royal family, so I think there's maybe a nod to that in some ways, but personally this outfit didn't do it for me at all.
Yeah, I wasn't that keen on it, like the very matchy accessories, and I'm not too sure about that very oversized collar.
Yeah, I felt like the fabric looked stiff, it looked heavy, the belt was sort of awkwardly high for me. And I think the main thing though was that I just wish the fit was a little bit better. To me, the yoke on the coat wasn't sitting right, the back flap wasn't sitting right. And I just feel like if you're paying for a Dior Couture piece, the fit would want to be flawless.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, you know, I am not at all a fan of Maria Grazia Chiuri's Dior. Anyway, I often have problems with her designs.
Kate kind of inversely wore a coat dress that was disguised as just a dress.
Yeah, it was lemon yellow by Amelia Wickstead. Had this crisscross detailing around the waist and a back zipper, which, like, how is that not a dress? But anyway, also fabulous yellow sort of saucer hat by Philip Treacy.
Certainly fabulous from one side.
I think we disagree about this. I thought it was a beautiful look. I thought it was really let down by the beige suede shoes.
Oh, yeah, gross.
Her addiction to these beige suede shoes often poses problems, I think.
Let's talk about this hat. Because when I saw, the first photo I saw was from the side. Wait, I just thought it was this sort of lemon yellow disc on her head. And I was like, wow, Judy Jetson, take me up to space. But then you saw the other side, and it was full of fabric flowers.
Yeah, I am not the biggest fan of fabric flowers. I do think in close-ups, I thought they complemented her updo quite nicely, the shapes, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it was too fussy for me with that look.
Then on Saturday, the Queen had been due to attend the Epsom Derby, but pulled out of that as well and sent Princess Anne in her stead. But if you can believe it, Anne going to the horse races wasn't actually the most exciting thing that happened that day, because Lilibet turned 1 and had a birthday party at Frogmore Cottage. According to the Sussexes biographer, Omid Scobie, this birthday party was an intimate backyard picnic with face painting and a cake by Claire Patak, who you may remember did Harry and Meghan's wedding cake, and of whom Tom and I are enormous fans.
Yeah.
We actually went there last Saturday.
Yeah.
And we had a cake with strawberry buttercream.
We did, yeah. And Violet posted a photo of the cake. It's, as you kind of would expect, incredibly beautiful. It's, again, a lemon and elderflower cake like Harry and Meghan's wedding cake, and it has a strawberry buttercream.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that the little banner on it said Lilibet rather than Lily.
Yeah, a little reminder there.
But so beautiful. She's such an incredible baker. It does sound like there were lots of people in and out of this backyard picnic, though.
Yeah, a lot of Straubenzies and other sort of godparenty kind of people. But it was notable that the Cambridges didn't attend, despite having apparently been
I didn't think
invited.
this was notable, Tom. We knew from weeks ago that they were going to be in Wales. I do think it's possible that they were dispatched to Wales to avoid having any questions of whether the Sussexes and the Cambridges were going to meet, and it sort of got them out of the way for a day.
I know. I sort of agree in a way. I also think that Charles and Camilla could have gone to Wales. He is the Prince of Wales, and it makes sense. Unless what they're doing is like preparing Wales for a new prince. If they had wanted to attend this party, I think they could have made it work.
I'm not seeing it as big of an issue, personally. According to a source talking to Entertainment Tonight, it's simply a coincidence they fell on the same day. There was no intended slight. And I can believe that. Okay. I think other events across the weekend, that's not necessarily true of, but in this case, it is. It's strange to me that there couldn't have been some other kind of event with Lilibet and the whole family if Harry and Meghan had wanted family members there.
Yeah.
Because this stupidly jam-packed weekend had so much Jubbly stuff on that had been planned for years.
Yeah.
That I get that it may not have been convenient for people to go.
No, that's true. I mean, it doesn't seem like Charles went to this picnic either, or the Queen. I mean, it kind of makes sense that the Queen didn't go out and about. She decided not to go to the Derby.
Yeah.
So, you know.
She was in Windsor, though.
Yeah.
On the subject of the royals being dispatched around the country, we should note that Anne went up to Scotland and Northern Ireland luckily received Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex.
Yeah, we actually know someone who performed for Prince Edward. I think it was part of the sort of 1950s themed part of the day. And this person described it as 70 years of dance moves, which is really amazing. And I really want to know what Prince Edward's thoughts were. But we also saw, quite grimly actually, George and Charlotte's first public walkabout.
This was in Cardiff. Like George in the first of a lifetime of navy suits, George in the first of a lifetime of walkabouts.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is not in Charlotte's future and she can do whatever she wants. But George, again, favouring his dad's signature look, navy jacket with different navy trousers and exactly the same brown shoes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I did feel sorry for them, and I think it must have been such an overwhelming weekend as a child. Like, I obviously will know what their kids can handle, but it just seemed like an awful lot to me.
And it's a turning point as well for them. That they've done this now, and I think it's going to be an expectation that they continue to do these kind of things. Which
I don't know that we'll see them on walkabouts with any regularity, but I think people will expect to see them at the church on Christmas and act trooping always, you know.
Yeah. But the big Jubbly event of the day was the Platinum Party at the Palace.
We talked about this before. This was a big concert held in front of Buckingham Palace, and the Queen didn't attend in person, although it's understood, according to the Evening Standard, that she watched it in her living room at Windsor Castle, possibly with the Sussexes.
Yeah, I thought that was like actually quite a nice detail from the weekend. I certainly don't expect the Queen to be like forced to go to things when she's in pain, and I thought the image of her like sitting with family watching it on the TV is actually probably the most relatable thing about the whole Jubbly experience, because I think a lot of people were doing something similar. Charles and Camilla were there in person watching everything though.
Lucky them. The big thing though was the fact that the concert opened with this short film, the sort of clip of the Queen having tea in Buckingham Palace with none other than Paddington Bear, voiced by Ben Whishaw.
People absolutely lost their minds over this. I found it quite sinister, to be honest. Firstly, although I have no proof, you cannot tell me they didn't digitally alter the Queen in some way.
There is something off, I think, about it.
I can't quite put my finger on it, but I think it might be like the eyes or something about like the speed with which she moves her face and head.
When I showed it to Tom first, he was like, is this a deep fake? Is this real?
It's something like uncanny valley about it. And like we do have recent videos of the Queen like giving addresses and things like in COVID and all of that we can compare it to. So I think that's maybe why I found it particularly kind of jarring.
I think though, I remember finding the Queen James Bond video at the 2012 Olympics very funny, and that was very exciting to watch. And I feel like the fact that the Queen was talking to, like, I was just imagining like the Queen talking to somebody in one of those like green morph suits with the little like dots all over them,
tennis ball on a stick, basically. Yeah.
And it just, I personally was totally unmoved by it, and honestly quite annoyed that Paddington was brought into this. I feel like it had a real sense of finality to it. The way Paddington says thank you at the end.
For everything.
It really felt like a goodbye almost.
Yeah, I think beyond that, I just hated that they took something that was so perfect, Paddington 2.
And Paddington 1. Nicole Kidman, villainous taxidermist.
Great movie, but specifically Paddington 2, I think, which is a very rare case of a sequel that is better than the original. And it's also a movie whose like message is anti-Brexit, pro-immigrant, and they used this, they perverted it to celebrate the monarchy. And it just, honestly, I felt it as like a personal attack.
I think as well, you know, it wasn't lost on a lot of people that the UK recently announced, and will very shortly, as soon as this Tuesday, be putting into action plans to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing.
Yeah, a policy that makes absolutely no financial or social sense and is like just a vile symptom of decades of racist policy making in the UK.
Yeah, and as many people pointed out on Twitter, Paddington Bear would not be allowed to remain in this country under the current Conservative government.
Yeah, let alone meet the Queen.
Skipping ahead a little bit here, but I was interested to see the Times and the Daily Mail reports this weekend that Prince Charles has privately described the government's policy to send migrants to Rwanda as appalling.
Yeah, so according to the Times, Prince Charles is said to be particularly frustrated at Boris Johnson's asylum policy as he is due to represent the Queen at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali, the capital of Rwanda, this month. A source had heard Charles expressing opposition to the policy several times in private and said he was particularly uncomfortable about it amid fears that it would overshadow the summit on June 23rd.
And the source said, he said he was more than disappointed at the policy. He said he thinks the government's whole approach is appalling. It was clear he was not impressed with the government's direction of travel.
This is so interesting because this is another time that Charles has said something which I sort of agree with, but that it's tinged with like a sort of personal angle and a sort of selfishness that like he doesn't want to be overshadowed at this Commonwealth event. And I'm like, oh, Charles, you were so nearly there.
But I think as well, it shows that Charles, unlike his mother, will never be politically neutral. We already know way too much about what Charles thinks. And I thought it was actually pretty hilarious that Clarence House did not deny that Charles was opposed to the policy, but insisted he had not tried to influence the government. And a spokesman said, "We would not comment on supposed anonymous private conversations with the Prince of Wales, except to restate that he remains politically neutral. Matters of policy are decisions for government." Come on, like... treating us like fools.
Yeah.
And also, you know, who is this source who has heard several times when Charles has expressed these views in private conversations and is running to the Times to tell them? Like, because I saw the Times royal reporter Valentine Lowe said Charles would be deeply embarrassed by his comments being made public. But the timing of this, with the first charter flight to Rwanda due to take off on Tuesday, this report coming the same day, the legal challenge to halt the flight and to stop the deportation of asylum seekers being rejected by the High Court.
Yeah, it's very curious timing. And I think you always need to sort of bear in mind that the vast majority of these leaks supposedly don't come without the approval of the principal.
Back to the concert.
Yes, Charles and Will both made speeches about the Queen. First up was Will. He took an environmental angle, talking about her Christmas message in 1989, in which she called on all nations to work together to protect the earth for our children and children's children.
He said, "It's my firm hope that my grandmother's words are as true in 70 years' time as they are tonight, that as nations we come together in common cause, because then there is always room for hope."
Weirdly, he didn't mention in this speech how she secretly lobbied to become exempt from clean energy laws in Scotland.
But Tom, Charles called her mummy.
And yeah, there were so many funny things on Twitter about this, like Charles sounding like a Victorian ghost that would like write things in blood on your mirror. But yeah, he paid tribute to her lifetime of selfless service, highlighting her role as a symbol of stability, unifying the UK and the Commonwealth as they negotiate this rapidly changing world.
Perhaps this is true of much of the UK, but I would say certainly not the Commonwealth anymore.
No way.
Like, as we talked in our last episode, the celebrations around the Commonwealth were nowhere near what they were at previous Jubilees. And in the days since, we've heard that Australia is very close to initiating moves to sever ties with the monarchy. Jamaica is planning to remove her as head of state by 2025.
Yeah, like, I think they need to stop talking about the Commonwealth in the way they have in the past. Like, they need to update this kind of rhetoric, I think.
The rest of the concert was seemingly fine.
Yeah, I think it generally went down well, like, for people watching. They were like, yeah, that was well done and fine. But we didn't watch very much of it at all.
It was watched by 13 million people, though, at its peak. Over 74% of all TV viewers, and it became the most watched TV event of the year.
Now, obviously, this is mainly due to the people they have performing. People don't tune in because they love the Queen so much as they want to watch Queen, fronted by Adam Lambert, and the other headliner, who was Diana Ross.
Yeah, and the other headliners were people like Alicia Keys and like basically a lot of American acts. You know, it was very striking to me that there were no major British superstars of the moment involved. Like, there was no Adele, there was no Ed Sheeran, although he did sing the national anthem the following day. There was no Dua Lipa. Like, all of the big names were Americans.
Yeah, like, the major British acts that performed were Queen, technically, although they were fronted by Adam Lambert, who's American, Elton John, who did a video performance, and Rod Stewart, who was apparently terrible. Like, all people who, like, didn't have anything else to be doing, you know.
I also wanted to point out that the BBC had to apologise and issue a correction after incorrectly displaying the Republic of Ireland flag to represent Northern Ireland during the concert.
So stupid.
What a stupid fuck up.
The English are just fucking idiots. But the party ended with a light show that included magical drones spelling out 70 across the night sky, and like lots of other pictures and messages and things.
You loved the handbag.
I love the handbag. The one that sort of really caught people's eye was the corgi with the kind of floating bone.
Horrifying.
Yeah. I mean,
I love corgis.
yeah, me too. But I think over the last like month or so, we've seen so many minging corgi designs just everywhere. I think just give the poor guys a break.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, as I was saying to you, that neither Charles or Will have a signature animal like the Queen does. That, you know, they don't have this kind of iconography around them.
Yeah.
If you were to do something similar for Charles, like, what would be his handbag? What would be his corgi? I don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Doesn't George have a favourite funny animal? Does he, like, love
Charlotte
lizards
loves
or something?
spiders.
Unfortunately, Charlotte's not going to be the Queen, Tom.
No. Basically, they're missing a very key bit of sympathetic PR and brand building, I think. So they need to start workshopping some ideas for a very late in the game favourite animal for Charles.
Finally, we get to Sunday. Honestly, by Sunday, I couldn't believe this thing was still going on.
Yeah. And I think it did feel like the country was a bit over the jubbly at this point. Like, 4 days celebrating the Queen. The weather was no longer very good. But regardless of all that, it was time for the Big Jubbly lunch.
Pretty much exactly what it sounds like. Community gatherings for a big lunch. Not totally clear on how that's different from a street party, but it seems like the Big Jubbly lunch had more of a centrally organised structure, and even had its own logo that we saw reproduced on a cake in Eastenders.
Yeah. Charles went to a big lunch at the Oval Cricket Ground in London, along with Camilla, who is actually a patron of the Big Lunch, which is a title I often claim for myself.
Beatrice and Eugenie went to one in Westminster where they spun plates on sticks. And I think, is that where there was a clip of someone asking Beatrice, who are you?
Do you think spinning plates is like a metaphor for trying to keep the monarchy afloat?
Oh, wow. That's very elegant, Tom.
I mean, I don't think it is a metaphor, but, just some food for thought. Edward and Sophie, they didn't do a big lunch, they did a long lunch, which is what they called the big lunch on the long walk at Windsor Castle.
And the Cambridges did a double whammy. Will and Kate went to a big lunch in Kensington, but they also posted photos on Instagram of their 3 kids making cupcakes in Wales for a street party there.
Presumably these were made the day before. They didn't just leave the kids making cakes up in Wales.
Kate was in them too, though.
Yeah. No, it was a smart bit of marketing there, I thought, from them.
I think the Cambridge social media game has been very striking all Jubilee. They had a lot of reels. There were like lots of different things going on their social media feed.
Yeah.
I thought they had a pretty interesting social approach to this whole weekend.
Yeah, they really made the most of it all, I think, in terms of documenting it. But however big, this lunch was actually just the precursor to the Jubbly pageant. It was like a huge, massive procession through central London.
It started with a military parade, including the gold state coach, which hadn't been seen on the streets of London in many years. But because the Queen wasn't going to be able to ride in the carriage, she didn't attend the pageant at all, they projected a hologram of the young Queen on the windows of the carriage, which was
so weird.
Dystopic. Like, so fucking weird.
Yeah.
The clips of people waving at the hologram of the Queen in the carriage.
It's another metaphor for, what the monarchy is. It's just a sort of hollow projection. But the carriage was then followed by a procession of floats, each representing different decades of her reign, with incredible celebrity appearances. The likes of Cliff Richard, Basil Brush, Kate Moss, Gok Wan, and Prue Leith all appeared.
Prue Leith, who was in the classic car procession, only her car broke down and had to be pushed by stewards. Very funny.
And then they kind of closed off the procession with like a big carnival section.
There were lots of royals at this one. Charles, Camilla, and all the Cambridges. Louis, again, stealing the show.
Yeah. Loads of faces.
I feel like he behaved like any 4-year-old would at this kind of very overdrawn, boring event.
Yeah.
And the photos of him with his hand over Kate's mouth were so funny.
Yeah, really, really good.
I thought the pictures of him sitting on Charles' lap were pretty cute. So did Charles. He posted them on Instagram.
Then right at the end, the Queen made a surprise balcony appearance with the heirs, Charles, Will and George, along with Camilla, Kate, Charlotte and Louis.
Yeah, and the positioning here was very intentional. The Queen, flanked by the heirs, definitely felt like, this is the future, peasants. We will reign over you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, sort of coupled perhaps with a Lion King moment for George of like, everything the light touches, George.
Well, I felt like because, this was the most we had seen of the kids, the Cambridge kids, ever.
Yeah.
And I could see that Kate was with Louis most of the time and that Will and George were together. And I guess this is something we're going to see going forward with Will sort of starting to show George the ropes, which is sad and shit for a child.
Yeah, definitely. I am interested in how people will feel having just so many kings now. Like, and also they're going to be kings who have spent decades in the public eye before becoming king, able to speak a lot more freely about things than the Queen was ever able to. Like, we talked a lot about Mystique when we were talking about Tina Brown's new book on our last episode. But like, how will they preserve that going forward? Because
They won't. They can't.
They can't. Yeah, that's the answer, really.
I had hoped to see a bit more of Harry and Meghan over the weekend, but they flew home by private jet an hour before the pageant even started, and they were pictured arriving in California later that day.
Yeah, a source close to Harry and Meghan told People magazine they aren't part of the working royal family anymore, and that's a decision they have taken. But maybe the public hasn't quite accepted that yet. Yes, they were low-key. They paid their respects and went home. They were really here to see the Queen, and they did.
Yeah, and I think that's a sort of acknowledgement that the Queen met Lilibet,
Yeah.
even though there weren't any pictures. I wonder if maybe we'll get a picture later at some stage.
I mean, if the royals are smart, they will have taken as many pictures of the Queen with Lilibet as possible.
Yeah. How do you feel about them leaving early?
I didn't really think that much of it at the time, but I do see, in retrospect, that it does seem like they were perhaps making a bit of a point, that it could come across as a bit of a fuck you. And would it have been the end of the world to wait a couple of hours for the pageant to end?
Yeah, I think if they were really being low-key, they could have gone home Sunday evening or Monday morning. And I can see why some people would consider it an attention-seeking move. Can also see why others would applaud them for this fuck you move.
Either way, I think that the royals kind of missed a trick with how they handled Harry and Meghan over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, I feel like the royals behave very childishly towards the Sussexes, and like you say, this is such a missed opportunity to patch things up and make more of a public gesture to them. I noticed that Clarence House included a picture of Harry and Meghan in one of their Jubbly posts, but I think Charles and the palace could and should have done more to include them. And as I'm saying this, I'm sure there are plenty of people screaming and opening up their Instagram DMs to tell us that Harry and Meghan would want to be included anyway, and that this is all Harry and Meghan's choice and whatever. But I think for the sake of the monarchy,
Yeah.
this was a bad look.
Yeah, but speaking of looks, on Monday, photographer and Sussex family friend Miss Anne Harriman released a portrait of Lilibet.
Our first proper photo of her, and she looks exactly like Harry.
Like, exactly like Harry.
Yeah, it's so funny. Mason Harriman also shared photos of Lily with his family, which also included one with Meghan. And I just thought that was such a nice photo. She looked very relaxed, very happy.
Yeah.
Black and white photo, Meghan's fave. You know,
Yeah.
you could tell that this was Meghan in her element. And that was really nice to see, I think, because there was such tension and all the stuff around them being at the Thanksgiving service was so heightened that I feel like them being able to do this the following day must have been really nice for them as a family.
Yeah, absolutely. But what are our overall thoughts having experienced this momentous occasion?
What stood out to me was how much the British media were united in praise of the Queen and the Jubilee. And the general feeling that I got from the press coverage was that the whole weekend had been a triumph.
Yeah.
Which is crucial for the royals, as we've been saying. You know, they really don't have any other big, joyful events like this on the horizon, unless maybe Kate has another baby or something. There's basically nothing for like 20 years until Prince George gets married, because I don't think Charles's coronation is going to be a happy event.
No.
The Queen's death will be casting a long shadow over that.
Absolutely.
People aren't excited about King Charles.
Nadine White wrote a really interesting piece for The Independent about how one-sided this media coverage of the Jubilee was. Like, the fact that it was exclusively celebratory in tone. It sidestepped entirely the recent backlash to the Caribbean tours. And basically, like, any and all criticism of the monarchy or anything from the last 70 years of British history, all of which happened under the Queen's reign. So she said, the past 4 days of wall-to-wall, uniformed, uncritical response to the Jubilee has been a gaslighting experience.
Yeah, and I thought she made a really good point when she said, is the struggle for racial equality and perhaps the monarch's inaction on it a stain on British history? Absolutely, but it is the truth, and the record should reflect that all the same.
Absolutely.
And she pointed out that a big part of this is the lack of diversity in British newsrooms, and that there aren't people, or maybe people don't feel comfortable speaking up about these things when they're massively outnumbered by white people who are happy to be like, we love the Queen, whatever. But I totally get what she felt. And, you know, I'm sure it's very different for a black woman. But even for you and I by the Sunday, when even, you know, people we know were talking about going to street parties and stuff, I also felt like, does nobody feel like there's something really wrong about this?
Yeah, it was really odd, and it was very disheartening in terms of like all the stuff we've been talking about for the last year in particular, with Andrew, with the royal tours, everything pointing towards like what I felt was like a public awakening to the problems with the monarchy on a scale that I hadn't seen in my adult life before. And this weekend made me feel very stupid and naive for thinking that.
There's this good newsletter I get called Black Ballad, and the founder, Toby Oradine, wrote about the Jubbly in it. She said, "To justify these celebrations would mean I would willingly have to close my eyes to the colonial trauma that the empire inflicted upon so many black and brown countries. It would mean for me to look the other way to British involvement in the Biafra War. It would mean I would have to forget that Buckingham Palace banned, quote, coloured immigrants and foreigners, their words, not mine, from serving in office roles in the royal household. To mark this Platinum Jubilee, we would have to forget that those from Jamaica and other Caribbean countries who are part of the Commonwealth were denied jobs, housing, access to religious organisations and medical treatment for decades, with some being callously deported."
Absolutely. Like, I can't imagine what it's like for so many families, like, watching the kind of coverage that the Jubilee got over that weekend.
Just blindly lauding
Yeah.
the Queen as if she's had this flawless 70-year reign. We kept hearing 70 glorious years.
Which is just not true.
It's a lie.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like you were saying, the Jubilee, watching it was a really uncomfortable, honestly disheartening experience. Like, we are in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and the whole thing felt in incredibly poor taste to me. You know, to spend £28 million of taxpayers' money on such a flagrantly lavish celebration was totally inappropriate, and it all felt so excessive, every aspect of it. Like, did we really need 4 days of this? 2 should have been more than enough to satisfy even the most hardcore royalist, I think.
Absolutely, like 2 max. And I think that the royals were really helped by the total absence of Andrew over the course of the 4 days.
Yeah, it allowed people to forget about all of the awkward, unflattering things about the royals and blindly applaud everything about the Queen without having to think about how she helped to protect him and to pay off his sexual assault settlement.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that there are a lot of people in this country, I'm going to say probably a lot of white people in this country, who are only looking for an excuse to ignore all of that as well.
Yeah.
So by excluding Andrew, however, you know, COVID related or not it might have been, they really played into that demographic of people who want to just view this as a totally unproblematic celebration.
Yeah, people who are very happy to turn a blind eye to those things. And I think we should mention that although Andrew was absent, Charles was really front and centre here. And the Jubilee did feel, as Clive Irving at the Daily Beast put it, like the beginning of a slow motion abdication, a sort of softening up of the public for King Charles.
And I think, like, you know, part of that even is maybe he's noticed that calling her mummy and playing up to, like, his relationship with the Queen could be a key thing in him gaining people's good favour or getting in people's good books.
Yeah.
And that, like, if he can start basically being king while she's alive, and he can talk about what mummy would have wanted and I love my mummy, that people will be like, well, okay, little baby king, you can be our king now because you're just trying to do the best for your mummy who we loved.
And Clive Irving described it a change in atmosphere over the weekend, which I think a lot of people picked up on, how it went from being this big pageant to a farewell, like the curtain falling on the Elizabethan era and that final balcony appearance, sending that very clear message about the future of the monarchy with the Queen surrounded by her heirs.
Yeah, the kind of iconography of it was very clear at that point, I think. But in speaking of the heirs, I think I want to talk about something to do with Will that's happened since the Jubbly that has actually made me even more pissed off with the royals than I was at the end of the Jubbly weekend.
On Thursday, the BBC and every other major news outlet in the UK, reported that Prince William had been spotted quietly helping to sell big issue magazines in central London in Westminster.
Now, for those who don't know, The Big Issue is a magazine that was set up to be sold by homeless people, long-term unemployed people, and those who need money to avoid getting into debt. It's like definitely a good thing, and that is partly why I'm so annoyed with Will for doing what is a very selfish, to me, PR stunt.
A man called Richard Hannant spotted Will and took the photos with him. He told the BBC, "I think what struck me is we've just got past a massive Jubilee event and days later he's out there supporting a charity like Big Issue. I think it's that I thought was most amazing, because one is a worldwide event. This is just a low-key event, literally standing on the side of the road with a homeless person. I was quite amazed that he could go from one massive event to such a low-key thing."
That's literally why he did it, Richard. Come on, like, wake up. Like, as we mentioned, like, it's been remarked upon a lot that the lavish expense of the Jubbly, coupled with gross displays of wealth, like at the opening of Parliament, with all that, you know, the gold chair and the crown and everything, it just feels so out of step with the financial realities of, like, most people in this country. So to choose to do something with a big issue is incredibly intentional, and like many of the royals' endeavours, it comes across to me, at best, too little, and at worst, a very one-sided PR stunt.
Yeah, it's poverty porn.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if Will really wants to help the big issue, he could have been pictured reading one, so other people might buy it and want to read what he was reading, or written something for them that people might buy to read, done an interview with them for the same reason, or better yet, got Kate to do any of those things, because she will have a bigger impact on that kind of thing than he would.
Yeah, because, you know, this would only make royalists want to buy one if they were able to buy one from Will.
Yeah, exactly. It's not going to encourage a kind of mass buying of the big issue on any kind of scale, I don't think. And he's chosen to do this sort of James Corden-style secret millionaire bit that it doesn't, as far as I can see, benefit the big issue in any big way, and it just allows him to sort of cosplay as a poor person and have people tell him how wonderful he is for doing it. Like, I saw people online wondering if this was like his sort of Diana moment. Just grow up. Like, absolutely not. This is, like you said, poverty porn. He's on safari.
Yeah.
But is the brother-in-law of the guy who took the photos, so retired Metropolitan Police Chief Superintendent Matthew Gardner, who shared the photos on his social media. And he said, "The finale to this unique occasion was when Prince William asked my brother-in-law if he wanted to buy the big issue, to which he replied, 'I have no change.' At this point, William produced a mobile card machine. You cannot teach that. Priceless, or should I say, princely."
Oh, God.
Fucking hell. Like, the number of people who will have seen that quote who take payments as a regular part of their job, or have done. Like, how dare you praise this man for taking out a fucking card machine? I'm just so angry by, like, everything about this appearance.
It was such an obvious stunt. And the language around it, you know, that he was quietly helping to sell the magazines. Oh, he was just spotted on the side of the street selling his magazines. Just luckily this random man happened to spot him and post some pictures on social media, and otherwise nobody would have known.
Yeah.
Utter nonsense.
Fucking bullshit. Absolute bullshit. Like, the royals love to sort of emotionally manipulate people, but they always seem to think they're being so smart about it. It's always so transparent, I think.
But, you know, that being said, a lot of people did like this appearance.
I know, I've seen so many royal watchers, like, praising him for it.
I think that does it, though, for us.
Yes.
And after 3 glorious years, we are going to be taking an indefinite break from the podcast.
Yeah, you may have realised that we've been finding the podcast a bit harder to do over the past year or so, and we're not enjoying it as much as we used to.
Yeah, and I feel like if it isn't fun for us to make anymore, I can't imagine it's very fun for anyone else to listen to.
Yeah. Like we said in our first episode, we wanted to find a middle ground where we could talk about the royals without taking them all that seriously. And we hope that that's what we've done over, 120 odd episodes?
Yeah.
But royal watching and royal watchers have, become so divided over the course of that time, I think, and, frankly, so toxic. And it has become really hard to laugh about the things that we used to be able to laugh about.
Yeah, and just everything about the podcast now is a lot more stressful than it used to be. And I think it would be very different if the podcast was paying our rent.
Yeah.
But the fact that we wanted to do it as, you know, something that we enjoyed doing in our spare time, it's not that anymore. Yeah. And I do feel sad about it because, you know, I have really enjoyed a lot of the podcast, and especially enjoy the people who messaged us about Kate's mysterious plasters, which made a return at the Jubbly, or Fergie's various book club shenanigans, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, thank you so much to everyone who has listened to us over the years, and especially to people who have tipped us on Ko-fi.
Yeah.
We are going to use that money to continue paying to keep our archive of episodes available for the rest of the year. And then when that runs out, I guess we'll see how we feel. We're saying this now, we could be back in like 4 months and feel revitalized and dying to talk about the royals again, or, you know, you may never hear from us again.
Yeah, but like, thank you so much, like you said, to everyone who's listened to us over the past 3 years, and we hope everyone has a fantastic summer.
Yeah, take care of yourselves and abolish the monarchy.
Abolish the monarchy.
What would you give it out of 10, George? How many marks out of 10 would you give it? 10 being the highest.
20.
20 out of 10. Okay, that's pretty good.
20.
I think Mummy's done well.